Hello individuals! So today's topic is going to be a little more personal. Once again, I don't want to make my channel completely makeup related and I want to reflect more on my username as well. And this video is going to talk about this video is going to be more on why that's important to me. So basically, when I was discovering my gender, when I was trying to figure out what my gender identity was, I only started questioning it because it was just this one thought that I had that I was like, I wonder what it'd be like to just, to be a guy. And I guess that was the one question I needed to ask myself from like years of not being completely uncomfortable with the way that I was, but feeling like there was more to it, there was more to me. And so one day, like maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I asked myself that question, and then I really started asking myself, like, am I really completely comfortable with the way that I am right now? Wouldn't it be interesting if I could just switch back and forth between bodies? And so questions kept coming up, and then, and eventually I dwelled on it. And it's not because, like, I had this sudden question, because even before that, like, growing up and going through puberty, I was scared of developing the body of a woman. I wanted to keep my body the same and not really grow up. Like, I have always been an adult in my mind. Like, I always knew that I was much more mature than my age, but I never wanted to physically grow up. And like, developing breasts were, so it was a conflicting thing for me, because I didn't necessarily want them, but I did want to be an adult. So part of me was like, yes, and then the other part of me was like, I'm okay with being the way that I am right now and being like equivalent to a male, like in a sense. Not that, girls and boys are treated the same way, but to me it felt like I didn't have to be so different, and then going through a physical change meant that people could look at me and, just see that difference. I don't think I thought of all of that, but I knew for a fact that I was very confused when it came to puberty and like understanding what it meant for me and the changes it would come with. I was scared of getting a period because I knew that there was going to be pain that come with it, and I didn't want to bleed every month. But for the most part, I tried to like forget those things. I'm like, I'm sure this is what everybody thinks about. I'm sure I'm sure everyone has a little bit of fear of, growing up or whatever. So I didn't think much on it. I didn't think much about it. But I did have little things like that, or like, I wanted to be one of the guys. I always wanted to be a tomboy, but I was never athletic. I could never get myself to be athletic because as a child, I was never brought to a park, so I was never physically active. I was overweight. So it's not like, I could suddenly be an athletic person that I wanted to be, so I can, like, play with, hang out with the guys or be one of the guys, but I could never get myself to be athletic, and I could never be one of them. And even now, I don't have a lot of male friends. And if I do, they're usually queer, and that's, I think, is coincidental, really. But for the most part, I could never, like, I don't have that many guy friends because it's just hard for me to talk to them. Like, it's still, even now, still a little, like, hard for me to connect with them. And then at the time, I wanted to, but I never could. I didn't think that I wanted to be with one. I just felt like maybe I wanted to be with them. And I used to call myself Joe. I would cut my birth name, and like try to bring that in, but no one caught on. Because I remember this one time when I was hanging out with my cousin and our family friend, and we were walking around, and I was like, you guys should just call me Joe, And they were like, but that's a boy's name, and I didn't understand why that mattered. I was like, okay, that's something I want to be called. Years later, when I was trying to figure out what my identity was, I relied on the internet. I Googled it, Googled what it meant, Googled what bigendered meant. I don't even know where I got the phrase from. And then I started watching YouTube videos. I started watching people talk about the way that they felt, and I could relate to some of them. I felt like, wow, okay, so this is what I've been feeling without me confessing that to myself. Like, I knew I had some kind of feelings. And so people were like, you know, one day I'd wake up and feel like a complete guy, and one day I'd wake up and feel like a woman, and like, you know, that's just how they felt, and that's how I felt like I could relate to at the time. So I came out as bi-gendered. I tried to make sure that I differentiated between my female self and my male self by the way that I dressed and by the way that I acted. And at some point I thought, this isn't me. Like, I'm so gay that I keep thinking of myself as being male. Like, that's not what, like, I'm not interested in having any male body parts or anything like that. That's what I told myself, and I had convinced myself that it was because of my sexuality that my feelings toward my gender existed. Fast forward a little more, and all of a sudden, like, I really start questioning it, and I'm like, okay, so I can't keep lying to myself. This isn't just my sexuality. Like, I know for a fact that this has to be completely different. But I didn't feel comfortable considering myself bi-gendered because I just didn't feel like, I always felt like, I didn't feel like it was just male or female for me. Sometimes I felt like neutral. I didn't want to be seen as either or. I just wanted to exist and be human and not have to worry about anything that, you know, society deems as male or female. And I think the problem with when I first came out was because I focused so much on societal roles. I thought that a male had to do this, a man had to do this, a woman had to do this, and if I didn't act that way, then there was no way in hell I could be bi-gendered, like, because I could never do either or correctly. And even now I know for a fact that I can't do either or correctly. But yeah, so back to my story. So I realized that it wasn't just that, and so at some point I figured, okay, so I must be tri-gendered, or at least genderqueer or something, and so I went to call myself gender fluid and genderqueer. And so because I thought that my gender must be fluid, like every day I must feel a different way, it turns out that what it felt like at the time was that, like, almost every hour it changed. All of a sudden I felt more masculine, all of a sudden I felt more feminine. So I was still very much confused with my identity, and at that point I stopped watching YouTube videos, but I felt like I was kind of on my own. I didn't know that many people who felt the way that I did. And the people who I did know who were trans wanted to transition. And I didn't know that many people who were genderqueer, and so I kind of felt alone and kind of felt like I was dealing with this on my own, which in a sense I was. And so a lot of what I feel now and a lot of what I preach on now is pretty recent. This was the summer of last year that I even came out as genderqueer and made sure, like, my pronouns used to change on a daily basis, and that was probably really confusing to people. And then eventually something clicked and I was like, no, you know what? I don't have to be either or. I don't have to conform to anything. I just exist. And eventually, like, I started, not eventually because this has sort of been building up, but things that I kind of ignored because I figured, I don't know what I figured. But my dysphoria with being seen as a woman and nothing else started coming more strongly, really, because I figured out who I was. Like, I didn't have to keep lying to myself, and I finally figured out who I was. I am genderqueer. You know, I finally accepted that, and then it felt like people just kept seeing me one way, and like all of a sudden, like, everything that, well, okay, I didn't think I was gonna get emotional. Everything that I, you know, kept dealing with, and all of the questions that I was facing from very young that I didn't know how to deal with because I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anybody to tell me anything because queerness was not a thing to me. It was not a thing that I was ever taught, especially in the household that I'm in. Like, being trans is just out of the question. Like, being gay is already bad, but being trans is like pushing it. So my throat is dry. So I felt like I didn't have anybody. I still sometimes feel like I don't really have anyone I can relate to, anyone who, like, completely understands what I feel like. But this is why I wanted to make videos. that's actually why I wanted to continue vlogging last year, and why I had my channel last year. I really focused on it, was to talk through the things that I still wasn't sure of. And then I created this gender journals on Tumblr, which I stopped using, I don't know why. But it was in a way for me to vent my feelings and see if I could find somebody else who felt the same way that I did. I don't think I need anyone right now, because I'm pretty sure in who I am, I just want to be there for someone who's dealing with the same thing. I'm hoping that one day somebody will find this, stumble upon this, and like, you know, come to terms with what they're feeling, the way that I did watching all the videos. So to end my story, a little later, I accepted that I'm all over the place. My gender is like the spectrum itself. Like, I can be very feminine and masculine at the same time. I do have a lot of masculine mannerisms, and you know, a lot of feminine interests and a lot of masculine. Like, I'm just all over the place, and that's a-okay. I'm still dealing with the whole, I don't like dressing like a male, I don't like, you know, all of that, because it comes with, that's a whole video on its own, and I can explain that in some other video. But I'll say this, that I am not completely comfortable, I'm not like 100% comfortable and happy with my gender identity, but I'm dealing with it. I'm finally like allowing myself to answer the questions, allowing myself to ask questions to myself and figure out how I feel. So for right now, I know for a fact that it's okay for me not to conform to societal roles. That's just not how I feel to be, and it's a-okay to just consider myself neutral no matter how I look like. Like, I was always scared, like, people are gonna look at me as it's too feminine, so they will never think of me as a man. Like, if that's how I feel like, that's how I feel like. And you know what? That's perfectly okay, and you know, I'm coming to terms with that. And so this video is probably really long, and that's fine. If you watch up to here, thank you so much. And if you are dealing with the same issues that I've dealt with, or are in any spectrum, or any point in the spectrum of transgender, then and you're too afraid to comment, you can always message me. My business inquiry email, you can also email me there and I will answer. I am here. If you don't want advice, that's cool. If you need someone to just listen to you, I could do that too. I'm okay with anything. But I know that it's difficult having to deal with something when society just sees man and woman, and sometimes when you're in the middle, or sometimes when you're all over the place, just like sometimes I feel myself to be, like, it's difficult. So yeah, I hope that that was a long-winded video. So answering the question that I had in the beginning, wow, if you watch up to here, then I'm gonna keep going on for like a little bit more. But the reason why I wanted to make YouTube videos is because YouTube videos were the things that helped me. And so this is why it's important for me to make videos about my gender, because, you know, I had questions and I needed people who answered them for themselves so I could see what it was like. So thank you so much if you've watched up to here. Subscribe, like, or comment, and you can give an individual their wings. And if you subscribe, you can join my winged family. And who doesn't want to learn to fly? Alright, until next video.